Hello and welcome to day 4 in the Louise Borglit case. This is the case about the 7-month, almost 8-month pregnant woman who was stabbed to death while walking her dog back in 2016. In this case, a 29-year-old man has been charged with the murder, and this case is very special because there is no physical evidence linking him to the murder of this woman, Louise. The only thing the prosecutor has is an undercover agent who was put inside the prison with this man, with secret recordings of their talks together and a room surveillance of his cell where you can hear him talking with himself. And we don't normally see things like that in Denmark. So this case has been filled with objections from the defense saying the undercover agent made an interrogation of the suspect, and if you are interrogated, you have the rights of a suspect. If you are charged with a crime, you have to be told that you are charged with this crime. You have to be told that you don't have the obligation to say anything, and you have the right to have an attorney present. He wasn't told that as it was undercover in a prison, but the prosecution says, well, this is just like if you have a surveillance tab on a phone. So this case is very special, and the first 2 days they have been arguing a lot about these secret recordings. And on the recordings, his story has been somewhat all over the place. If you have watched the previous videos, you would have seen him talk about he was far away from the murder site at the time of the murder. He was at a friend's house eating at the time of the murder, or he was 5 minutes away on a train station right near to the murder. He has been talking about he had the murder weapon, he threw it away, his DNA was on the murder weapon. But all of this, he said, is just bravado. It's just to be a tough guy. This undercover agent had a cover story about him doing some terrible things to a woman in Greenland and I believe Portugal. So he's just trying to be tough as him because in prison it's eat or be eaten, so you have to be a tough guy. But today the recordings showed somewhat of a different picture. But again, it's up to the court to evaluate, does this count as hard evidence or is it just hearsay? But some of the things he talked a lot about, he did that in the other days too, is stabbing people. He has a fondness for stabbing. He's talked about in previous videos how to stab someone so they die fast, and they have him on tape today talking about stabbing the police agent in the throat because he was tired of him asking him all these questions. But most of the evidence today is from the 3 weeks the police agent was in this prison with the suspect. This is Enemark prison in Denmark. It's our Supermax. He was put in there because he was deemed to be a dangerous inmate. He is in prison for the attempted murder of an ex-girlfriend. So he has been in isolation for 23 hours of the day, and this undercover agent was his only contact he could talk to when they went out walking and had some free time. So this case relies completely on the recordings from this undercover agent. But on the tapes today, there was a lot of things that could incriminate him. But again, is it a smoking gun? I'm not sure. He's talking about some woman who is pregnant, so we have to do it all over again, just like for 5 years ago. 5 years ago from the time of the recording lines up with the murder of Louise, so it could be incriminating. But again, he says, well, it's not about her. He's talking about he's living in fear of what he can do. He's talking about he's only been taken for one thing out he had done something to 5, well, he calls them the B word, but only for 1 out of 5 B words had he been caught from. He's talking about people on the television who has been caught for murder, saying they are amateurs because they don't understand how to get away with murder. He's talking about not regretting anything. He want to show the world how many he can kill. And he's saying that women are irritating and fucking idiots. But again, he just said, well, that's not how I view women. It's something different, and it's just to act tough. Always the same explanation. It's just because in prison you have to have some reputation. So he's just saying it to act tough so nobody does anything to him. There's also something about it wasn't planned, but it was in control. It was in control, so I wasn't taken. This, he explains, is some inmate attacking a prison guard and how he did something in control so he wasn't captured while talking about someone else. It just seems very weird to me. So again, how much will the judges rely on these testimonies, because he's somewhat implicating himself with his choice of words, but again, he always has the explanation, it's not me, it's not Louise, it's not about this case. He's also listening to a television program about a very famous case in Denmark called the Amager Man, a man who raped a lot of people, and they're talking about him on the television as the most cynical criminal in Denmark. And here he's heard on the tapes laughing and saying, it's just because you haven't caught me yet. There's also, he's saying they shouldn't do anything to him because he's a psycho. And he's talking about he and his murder buddy was never caught and won't be caught back when he was 23. 23, again, it lines up with around the time Louise was murdered. He's 29 today, it's 7 years ago, so give and take a year. Again, how much the court will rely on this, it's hard to say. We are not the judges, we can't say it, but again, a lot of things that could be interpreted in some way to have something to do with the murder of Louise. And he's talking about what he did back then was because he was wasted. And we know he has a serious drug problem. We know he has a serious psychic problem. So again, all of this was because he was befriended this police agent. They were talking for about 3 weeks. Then he got very tired of him, and he told his defense lawyer, who had the opportunity to question him in the end of the day, that he had a suspicion he was an undercover agent, and he just told him all these things to test if he was an undercover agent. But in the end, because this undercover agent keep pressuring to talk about it, he wanted to beat his teeth out, and he told him that if he didn't let him be, he would beat him. And then the agent was pulled from the prison. Later, he was moved to this prison in Nørre, and here he was visited again by the police agent. They made up a story about the police agent had been to Greenland and been there for some time, and now he was back, and they had a few talks in the prison again. And in these talks, he's talking about the knife is on the surveillance tapes. And this, he said, well, it's not the murder weapon, and it's not the murder weapon I told you I threw out when I went to the psychiatric hospital. But I had a knife. I had a fishing knife, and that was the knife I was talking about. So again, he has an explanation for all the things on the tapes, but how good they are, that's up to the judges to explain. And he's also talking about they don't have anything on me when they are talking about this Louise case. But he still has a bad conscience. So again, Is it enough to say it was him? No, but does it point a finger at him? Yeah, somewhat. And the last thing he's telling this undercover agent is, I don't hope there was any surveillance, then I'll be fucked. So, again, a lot of circumstantial evidence pointing at him, but is it enough to convict him? That will be the groundbreaking in this case. After these questions, his defense lawyer had the opportunity to question him and try to explain their side of the story. And I have to say, as I see the transcripts, they didn't do very much. They started out talking about his bad family connections. He's an adopted child. He has no connection to his parents or his family. He has psychiatric problems. And then they tried to explain how he knew that Louise had had her nose cut off, because that hadn't been in any of the papers, but he knew that on some of the tapes. So now he has a story about when he was incarcerated in another prison for the attempted murder of his ex-girlfriend. The police came, threw some pictures at him and said, see what you've done. And again, he wasn't told he was under suspicion for the murder, or he was charged with the murder, but they threw 3 pictures at him, 2 full body and 1 of the face. So that's why he knew about the nose being cut off. He also says that his lawyer showed him again the pictures with the no nose in the other case. So is that believable? Maybe the lawyer will be coming into this case and talking about it, but him knowing the nose had been cut off when it hasn't been in any of the papers, in any of the TV mentions of this case, that could be an indication he was there. But maybe he has an explanation that the police or the lawyers told him the nose was cut off. But that was most of the things that the defense tried to focus on. Then he said, well, I knew that the agent was an undercover agent, or I believed he was. And that was most of his defense today. There wasn't anything where they tried to put him in a different spot or ask into this story about the drug dealer friend he was eating with, anything to explain all the tapes where he's talking about stabbing. It was just a bit about his past, a bit about how he could possibly know about the nose being cut off, and then his talks with the agent that he ended up having a beef with. So I don't think it's the best defense, but I haven't been in court. I'm only reading transcripts, so maybe they did it better in court. But still, it's relying on the judges to find all these recordings believable or non-believable. I will say today we finally had something that could indicate that he could have done it. The other days it's been a lot of talk around the case. Today there's the talking about the pregnant woman 5 years ago, the 1 out of 5 B words that he had been caught for doing something to, that he's a psychopath, that he's the most cynical criminal in Denmark, and things like that. So is it enough? I don't know. I'm not sure. But if the lawyer comes in and testifies that he didn't show him any of the pictures, so he has this special knowledge about the nose being cut off, it could spell trouble. But we'll see when the trial continues. And I want to thank you very much for watching my video, and I hope you have a nice weekend.